What's up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of the All Smith Project. Today's guest is helping humans physically, mentally, and emotionally. I'm really excited to unpack emotions in our muscles. It's a little bit of a confusing topic for most, but once we get a gentle peek behind the curtain with the mindset and the genius of Richard Aceves, you're going to have a pretty strong grasp on what it means to dissect emotions in our muscles. Without further ado, Richard, welcome to the show, man.
Thank you. Thanks for having me on, brother.
It's always so cool to connect with you. You've been such a steward and such a student within the space. You and I got to cross paths roughly 2015, 2016 when I was in pursuit of trying to win the CrossFit Games with Team Invictus. And you always had this loving energy about you that simultaneously, in my opinion, really meets people where they're at, and this intuitive approach that it's hard to verbalize with words. It has to be felt. And I just want to make sure people understand that you have gifts, and they're things that aren't necessarily things you can pull out of a textbook. It's something that I'm very excited to watch you learn to communicate and learn to help people understand your intuitive approach. I'm not certain I said that appropriately, but it's definitely something that I felt like deserved to be known for those that are listening to this episode today.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, thank you for the kind words. I think I just always go with my gut, just kind of the three core values that I have for myself as an identity, as an individual, and then as a coach is passion, respect, and knowledge. And they kind of interlay within each other. And so you can't expect respect from others if you don't respect them. And I think from an early age, I did what I was passionate about, and I followed my heart and my gut in whatever it was that I was doing, which led towards gaining the knowledge and not just memorizing the information or regurgitating, what's being given at a seminar or a workshop. And that's really been kind of my path forward ever since I was younger and was in the hospitality industry. It's just, I think that everybody deserves the rightful amount of respect as I want to be given. And, you can learn from everybody, and you never know where somebody is in their current path. And so you have to meet them where they're at, especially if you want to be in that mentoring or coaching side of things.
Yeah, for sure. You
It's
mentioned
not
the hospitality space. Yeah. I was not aware that was something that you explored a little bit in a place that you spent a lot of time. What was that like? Because I would assume that helped groom your bedside manner and helped you develop the empathy and the intuition to then meet people where they're at and allow that to foster and synergize with fitness.
Yeah, so I started cooking at the age of 13. And then on my freshman year of high school, I told my mom that she had two options. I could homeschool, so I could go get a under the table job cooking in the back of a restaurant, or I would be ditching school to go cook in the back of a restaurant. It was her choice. So I gave options.
Wow.
I'm very stubborn when I want
13,
something.
man.
Yeah.
Your poor mom.
I was very driven. I had a wonderful mentor, Chef Bryce, who allowed me to go to the Montage in Laguna Beach, which if you're a California native, you know what a great hotel and resort and restaurant that was. And I would work there 1 to 3 nights a week, and just kind of picked up skills on how to deal with when shit goes south, how to deal with pressure, how to make things look pretty. And you start to understand that there is cooking the information side of things. So understanding the skills to make plates look pretty. And then there is the knowledge, the wisdom, the passion behind making, 3 ordinary ingredients taste amazing and give an actual experience in a bite of food. And I think when I look back on it, that's one of the biggest takeaways that I have is there's the information that you can learn at school or certifications or books, but there is no information that is turned to wisdom and knowledge until you truly spend present, active time developing or honing in those skills and that information. And so I think that was one of the biggest things for me going from, the culinary world into the fitness world was I don't know that much. There's a lot that I need to understand, and no book will ever give me that amount of knowledge. It's the capacity to connect to the human that I'm working with, to give them the experience, to provide the service that they want, that I'm going to really gain the minutes, the hours behind how to best apply, all the different skills, methods, exercises, whatever you want to the person so that they can be as effective as possible in their training.
Move fast and break shit. LSKD develops functional sportswear with a streetwear aesthetic that's on a mission to inspire you to chase the vibe through sport, fitness, and adventure. I train daily in the rep shorts and love the versatility they offer. The zipper pocket is an absolute game changer. I go from training at the gym directly to meetings, running errands, or prepping for podcasts. The LSKD tribe has become true family, and we are excited to continue to develop our community. Shop now at lskd.com and use code ALLSMITH. We chase the vibe here at AllSmith. Let's all become 1% better every day. That's very well said, man. For those of us like myself that are so curious as to the interworkings in between your ears, when you say connect, what does that mean to you? Because that's a word that I think some people can connect on a surface level. Some people can observe behavior and be like, okay, they're a little bit depressive, they're a little bit anxious. But then there's also that next level that's kind of like, I'm taking all of these things into consideration. I've seen this person's social media. I've texted with them. I've observed their body language. I can feel the frequency at which they're operating at. They're either in pursuit of extreme intensity or they're afraid of intensity. You're watching, certain biomechanical systems take place. You're watching how they interact with other people, how they orient themselves in a space. There's a lot of you taking things in that I'm not sure everybody has that observant eye. So when you say the word connect, what exactly do you mean?
I would say at the basic level is, first and foremost, do you actually give a shit about the person?
Yeah.
Versus
I call
are
that
they
gas.
just another,
Give a shit.
or are they just a one-on-one? It's very simple. It's that to me would be the one thing for anybody that's wanting to become a coach or go into that field or even the hospitality world, right? Do you give a shit? It's, do you actually pay attention? And so I think the level of investment, it's a two-way street. But I think that when you're able to have a fundamental understanding of, tension in the body and, as I say, emotions in our muscles, but basically when I see somebody, I assess them based on posture, and the posture, we can go with this later on, but it's not so, the posture could be falsified confidence or insecurities, X, Y, and Z. I'm looking at how they carry tension. So when they're sitting and they're at their most comfortable, and I actually can connect with them at a point where I can make them feel safe, right? And confident to talk to me and open up, then we can actually start to open up. So then I can see how the body's holding on to tension, which allows me to see how they perceive the world and how they react to stressors. And, there's a lot of different systems at play. So I'm paying attention to, posture, where the body's holding on to tension. I'm paying attention to breath. Are they breathing through their mouth? Are they breathing through the nose? Are they holding their breath? I'm paying attention to pupils. I'm paying attention to cheekbones, to eyebrows. I'm using all of these different tools to connect with somebody. And I'm not connecting to stroke my ego and give them a reaction or, be like a psychic tarot reader and tell them what their future is going to be or what their past was. I'm using this in a way that I can allow them to be safe, and I can meet them where they're currently at. If I can create safety within that environment, then there's no walls that need to be put up, and now we can actually get to work with what needs to happen. So my goal when I connect with somebody is understanding I always say as a coach, I'm understanding the role that I need to be playing, whether it's the dad figure, the brother, big brother, small brother, the sister, the mother, the son, the daughter, right? There's all these kind of different hierarchy type roles that this person is truly seeking approval from or expression for. And that's usually how I get my in to create a safe environment. And we can just have a conversation. The
I really
next
like
thing with
that
connecting,
yeah, I really like
yeah,
that
go for it.
ideology around what role are you playing. I think the way you described it, Richard, was very primal. I thought that was rad in the sense of like watching the eyebrows, the cheekbones. I think they're things that some of us see and pay attention to, but we don't really have the systems or the operations to be able to label, oh, we see this, we see this. It's just like, oh, it's intuitive. But it's actually deeper
Yeah,
than that.
yeah, I think it's too much effort, and and it's not for everybody. I mean, again, we have a wide spectrum of human beings, and some people are just not great at connecting with other humans, but they're great at understanding the science and the theory, and all the so there's different spectrums of humans and how people work, but it's part of it is intuitiveness, and the second part is being present, right? So it's not so much about what can you do for me, but it's more of it takes a lot of effort to be like, okay, so what can I do for you, right? It's part of that humility of giving service to somebody and really opening up those doors. And some people are better than others. I mean, it's just it's partly learned behavior, and I think a lot of it is a natural coding that probably happens through generations as well.
Yeah, for sure. What is it about you that leads to this massive interest within the emotions within our muscle? Like where did that start? And like so many people have fitness goals that are very performance oriented or body composition oriented. I think it sounds very cliche and it's a part of, the beginning of the year. Hey, I love fitness because it always puts me in a better mood. But I think
Right.
you're exploring that on a deeper level to better understand like why does movement shift our state? And then what is the state that we're in? Are we in pain? Have we had past or potential future traumatic experiences that we're holding on to? There's that famous book, The Body Keeps the Score. And you're very familiar with all of these realms of thought. What is it about you, Richard, that makes you really interested in the emotions in our muscles?
I want to have an I want to change the way that fitness is perceived by the 99% of the world, and revolutionize it just like CrossFit has revolutionized the fitness industry. So that would be like the first major interest in it. Um, the bigger concept is make, I want to have an understanding of the emotions in the muscles not be something spiritual, not be something hoo hoo ha ha pseudoscience. I want to be able to have an explanation for it that could be backed through, some Western science. So there's part of it, that I fight with different people that are out there. I think that within the fitness scope or the health scope, you go very objectively or you go very subjectively, and that's an issue. People are always at extremes, and I just want to get everybody to meet in the middle, because we all have had weird experiences where you have the greatest workout of your life and you're laughing uncontrollably, or you've had a very aggressive workout and you're crying, you don't know why, or you had an emotional outburst, or you've had a workout and other thoughts pop in your head of past events and you're trying to overcome them. We've all had great epiphany moments. And one of the things that for me really struck home was I keep seeing people that are influencing the space preach something that they can no longer practice. And so
Mm.
I saw this a lot when I was educating CrossFit coaches and doing seminars at CrossFit gyms and functional fitness coaches. And all of these coaches were professing the practical application of being healthy and active, but they no longer practice that discipline.
Mm.
They stopped doing CrossFit because of their shoulder pain or their hip pain, or they would, and they would profess how amazing CrossFit was for their lifestyle. Yet these people kept dealing with acute or chronic pain of the shoulder, the hip. These people that would never go see a physiotherapist or chiropractor or dry needling or massage therapy are not going on a weekly basis. So it was no longer really professing health. You're actually I mean, you look healthy, right? But anxiety is going up, pain and discomfort's going up, right? There's a shift there. And so I
I feel like
wasn't
it's a
on
misalignment
board of that.
between mind, body, and soul, and it's this
It's a somatic
pursuit
error.
of satisfaction of ego as opposed to, okay, this is what my body wants, this is what my body needs. Here's that internal whisper of my gut and my intuition. I need to listen to that as my guiding compass. But because it's their occupation, it's because it's because of what they know. All of a sudden it's
Right.
familiar. So it's like, hey, let's just keep fighting. Let's fit a square peg in a round hole. And I think what you're
It's
doing
a
a really cool job of is getting people to then zoom out, better understand why they're feeling what they're feeling, take a reflective self inventory rather, and then be like, you know what do you want? What makes you feel good? What shifts your state? Because those things are then going to generate a better understanding of the nervous system and the fluctuation between sympathetic and parasympathetic, your fight or flight versus your rest and digest. And then from there, you can better design a protocol where fitness and health and wellness synergize and harmonize with your quality of life, as opposed to you just sacrificing everything to do the workout and then paying the price later.
right. Yeah, it's partly you know, if we are using exercise and fitness for health, then the constraints should be done to have health physically, mentally, and emotionally. And again, they're all feedback loops, right? So you could start getting healthier physically, but if the constraints start to change and we start to push the physical level to a certain extent, now we start to analyze everything. And now we start to
Mm.
have more mental anxiety or more symptoms of anxiety or high stress. We become more hyper vigilant, right? And so then we actually start to go backwards. And the goal with what I want to do is, I practice what I preach. Um, I've made mistakes and so on and so forth, but I feel amazing all the time. And maybe not all the time. I go through ups and downs. Nothing is linear. But it's more about being able to understand that if we're teaching that movement is medicine, then why are all these professionals talking about mental health and their struggle with mental health, yet they still keep training the same way? For me, it triggered something. So I was like, okay, so let's chase it. So that would be like the first reason why I got into kind of emotions in our muscles. The second one was I was having experiences. I mean, there is something about the pure experience of laying down in a gym in the middle of Australia, which is full of massive bodybuilder dudes that are probably up the wazoo on tren and who knows what else. And you're bawling your eyes out because you're remembering things that you thought you already remembered, but you're actually experiencing them, not just having a brief memory, but reliving certain events. And you're like, what the hell is going on? So for me, it was like I was having these experiences and I was like, how is this happening? And, from there, you get curious. I'm a passionate person. I'm like, well, this is interesting. So you start to chase after it and you start to see the correlation and you start to see the patterns. And, once you've dealt with 500, 1,000 people that have similar experiences, at some point you're like, okay, so this seems to be my new truth, right? What can I find out more and more about why this is happening? And that's been kind
So
of
let
the
me
reason I've gone into
recap
it.
that real quick to better understand. You saw patterns, you related them
Yeah.
to some of your personal experiences. Then you took that curiosity and explored it a little bit through individual case studies with a wide variety of clients. And then those patterns started to be reoccurring. And then because
Correct.
those patterns were reoccurring with mental, physical, and emotional responses to training, to traumatic experiences from the past that were arising through state changes associated with exercise, you then were like, ooh, I need to get a magnifying glass and look even deeper into this, because this is a consistent trend that I'm not just seeing in one country, but I'm seeing it in various countries. I'm seeing it as a whole within the human experience. And I would probably argue, and you would probably agree with this, there's something to the human experience that doesn't quite meet the eye, but it must be felt. And it's a really
Right.
challenging set of words because there's not a ton of funding that goes into the research of that. So then when you get the scientific keyboard warriors that begin to attack and say, oh, there's no research on this, there's no this, there's no that, and it's like, there isn't yet. But every little bit
Exactly.
of research started with a trailblazer like yourself that was like, hey, I'm seeing trends, I'm seeing patterns, and this is worth exploring because it's helping
Right.
people be seen and understood, and then shifting their state to enhance the quality of their life.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, look at Wim Hof, right? 2014, they were calling him crazy, and he was a circus, and he was a joke. And look at now, the whole
Yeah,
breath and cold exposure movement that's happening.
yeah, totally, man.
so so that's the key. Is I when I see things that I feel are true, I chase them, and it's for me, it's I want to change the world. And if I can change one person's, if I can give one person perspective and change their perception and make them feel better and overcome their traumas, I've changed their world. And
Yeah.
that's enough. I think I've done it more than with just one person, but if I need to do it one person at a time, that's what I'll do.
It's definitely a big, hairy, audacious goal, but it's one of the things that really makes me admire you, Richard. And I want to go a little bit deep here for a second, which is where you and I like to hang out. We don't necessarily like
Yeah.
to hang out on the surface, but we like to take that shovel, start digging into the earth a little bit to better explore. Peptides. There's been a lot of buzz about peptides and what they can do for the body, skin, muscles, and health. What exactly are they? And do they live up to the hype? Your body makes peptides. They are strings of amino acids, which are the building blocks of proteins. Peptide therapy involves using prescription-based peptides to help treat and manage a variety of health conditions to maximize performance. Peptides consist of 2 to 50 amino acids and are made naturally in the body to act as important signaling molecules for many physiological and cellular functions. There are over 7,000 known functions of peptides in the body, and adequate levels in the body are imperative for performing at optimal levels. Discover a transformative journey to optimal well-being with Live Peptides. Live Peptides offer a natural and effective approach to health support. Embrace the difference. Choose Live for a path to vitality that prioritizes quality, innovation, and your unique wellness goals. My personal favorite is BPC 157 with thymosin beta for optimizing gut health, tissue regeneration, and healing. Head over to livenatural.com and use code ALLSMITH for 20% off peptides. That's LIVVNATURAL.com with discount code ALLSMITH for 20% off peptides. Traumatic experiences leave us with a deep emotional wound that can potentially manifest as pain and discomfort within our bodies. Why is that something that you're so passionate about? Because typically as coaches, not always, but typically what I see as far as my pattern recognition of 15 plus years in the industry, we as coaches try to give what we also need. What were
Right.
the traumatic experiences that allowed you to develop a clear set of lenses and a deep-rooted level of empathy to then think, okay, I've felt this before. I want to use movement and my exploration and curiosity as a man and as a coach to ensure that I can help assist and co-pilot other people that might be having a similar experience.
Yeah. So the reason I stopped the culinary world, I was in a rock climbing accident. And so that's a sort of traumatic experience. I was hit by a boulder at 5,000 meters, so 18,000 something feet of altitude. Um, I was on the mountainside for around 12 hours. My hip was broken to about 35 pieces. I had my ulna completely pulverated and I had to have 2 ulnar replacements. I spent 5 months in bed. And the diagnosis that came back was be happy you're alive. There's no spinal damage, but you'll be lucky if you're walking, normal for the rest of your life. You'll probably be in pain the rest of your life. You won't be doing any exercise whatsoever. Basically be happy with your sedentary self and learn how to read more books or watch Netflix.
Wow. The planting of self-limiting beliefs based on a traumatic experience and knowing you were just ammo within your intrinsic motivation system to be like, fuck off. I'm going to deconstruct everything you just said. And I'm going to make the rest of my life the best of my life.
Exactly. Basically. The initial thought was just fuck off.
That's why I love podcasting, man. It's like, I didn't know any of this about you. And I've known you since like I was talking to our really good friend and production manager, and I was sharing with him. I'm like, man, I've known Richard since like the end of 2015. That's almost a decade. Like that's a long time. And I never knew about the rock climbing accident, man. I appreciate you for sharing. And I'm very curious, like what came next? How did you kind of rehab from that experience?
The fuck you kind of led into, and this is again why I love CrossFit as a training methodology. I think CrossFit gave me the strength and the muscle thickness to brace the impact for that boulder. And then, spending the time in bed, I've started to obsess about how humans recover. And, this is way before, everything that is online is online. I mean, there was some stuff on there, but yeah, from there it was just like, I'm sort of going to go with what my body's telling me to do. And I always put it in the scope of if this was, even back in 1950 or, let's go 1900s, 1800s, I'd be dead. Right. So let's say that I would have gone down the mountain, X, Y, and Z happened, I survived. If I couldn't be functional within, the scope of what a human needs to do, which is walk, carry, push, pull things, then what the are you doing? You'd be killed by a lion or be fed to the wolves or something. So that was kind of my mentality for it. And I was like, okay, let's figure out how we're going to get better. And that was my big start to kind of go over these hurdles. Now, obviously, Western medicine has its rights, and I went a bit too gung-ho after some surgeries. It was about 6 surgeries in the following 5 years as I had my CrossFit gym and tried to compete and, get stronger, get faster, all those good things. I started to learn a lot. I think the first hurdle was I couldn't run. I still don't enjoy running. I didn't enjoy running back then, but I was like, it's something that I need to do. And so that was something that I started to decompose on myself. I was like, okay, so I can't run, but I can do, cardiovascular movements. So I can start rowing, I can start biking. I was like, but how come I can bike if it's essentially the same sort of movement pattern as a run? So then it's an impact thing. So then I need to understand how to build up the tolerance for impact in my hip in order for me. And that was just kind of the running mentality of how do you build yourself back up from ground zero? And then after surgery and after surgery and after surgery, I was like, I'm tired of just being in pain, right? So I always say movement and training is always a way for you to do a fuck you to a past event, to a past self, to a past person. It's a way for you to express that. Breathing is a tool for you to allow you to be in the state that you need to be in for the present moment and express. And nutrition is a way for you to want to deal with the future, right? So what's coming up next, you're going to fuel yourself for the future. And so for me, there came a moment where I started to realize you're just beating yourself up because you want to say fuck you to the doctor that told you that you weren't going to walk. And that was like, it was like literally an overnight experience where I was like, I said that to him. I mean, I'm deadlifting 700 pounds. I'm back squatting 600 pounds. I have a 6-minute mile. You saw me pushing the sleds and doing the burpees with you guys at Invictus. Like, what else do I have to prove? I'm here. You know what I mean? So I've expressed my frustration and my anger that I had from that past self. And that in itself, that acceptance that wasn't a cognitive acceptance, it was like the body, the mind, the heart, like everything aligned, gave me this expression where the discomforts, the minor tweaks that I had that I was carrying onto just sort of evaporated. It was crazy. Mm-hmm. And so from there, I was like, that's interesting. And those were just kind of small stepping stones into, when I look back now, there were like the black swan moments, those epiphany moments where you're like, well, that makes a lot of sense. And so I think that the trauma kind of really allowed me to see how much of movement is always about trying to prove something to a past version of yourself, or a lack of expression that should have happened in a past event, right? And I think that's what trauma is. We think of trauma of what society puts on as, abusive relationships or abusive parents or these sort of extreme moments. But trauma could be you're going to work every day to a job you fucking hate, sitting in traffic, listening to a podcast, trying to zone out, so can't wait to get home, to, hopefully not a screaming wife and kids, to, like those are small buildups of trauma. They create reactive mechanisms within the nervous system, because the body's like, well, fuck it. We're going to go to a place we don't want to be in, but we need to be in to survive in this society. So I'm just going to zone out. Now you're in a collapsed state. You're frozen. You're an autopilot. Yeah. And then something comes up and you have this panic attack. Well, that panic attack's because your job is now forcing you to be present, X, Y, and Z. And so these were all things that, for me, movement really helped in dealing with that past trauma. But that's what it is. Trauma is information coming into the body, right? It's events that are happening that are building up. I went on a tangent, dude. I'm sorry.
You didn't, though. And what I really admire is the passion associated with the why. And there's that famous Henry David Thoreau quote, which is, most people are living lives of quiet desperation. They're in these traumatic experiences, living lives that aren't quite fulfilling, just to make a buck, to satisfy their lifestyle, and eventually just get their head to the pillow at night. They're not actually living lives that are maximizing their human potential and pursuing their peak expression. And what's so admirable is, like, you've been that guy. You've felt what that feels like. You self-assessed and realized, like, oh, a lot of movement is deconstruction of the past. Breath work gets us into the present moment and allows us to find mobility. And then you realize, like, oh, my nutrition choices of the now actually either positively or negatively affect my future.
Yeah.
And so you've really diagnosed this, like, past, present, future, and shown that you've taken a very zoomed out lens, as opposed to, like, I mean, every business owner would say, hey, it's really hard to work on the business when you're working in the business. It's really hard to work on self when you're always in it. But if you're able to, like, press pause for a moment, kind of zoom out, shift the lenses, have some awesome conversations with thought leaders like yourself, you can then explore that, okay, maybe talking about it isn't the best for everybody. And I've heard you talk about that before, where it's like that famous quote, like, don't talk about it, be about it. But that actually has a deep-rooted meaning, which is movement can be a great tool to help people enhance blood flow and open up channels and levels to heal. It doesn't always have to be talk first. It could be introducing blood flow, asking some better questions. Then we're playing with some mobility. Then we're getting a nice pump. And then based on that pump, we're shifting state. And then based on breath work associated with the movement, now you're a more self-actualized human being in pursuit of healing and opening up to have those harder conversations, versus at the onset, you might be guarded.
Yeah. Yeah. It's something new I've been playing with, it's the oscillation of the breath, the heart rate, and the muscle contraction, and allowing them all to be in sync, right? So light is very big right now, right? It's trending because of, and what do they talk about? It's the frequency. Same with sound, right? The audio part of it. Uberman just had a podcast on hearing sound at 42 hertz for better mental focus and clarity, X, Y, and Z, right? We're at a quantum level. We're functioning at frequencies, at a macro level, we're also functioning at frequency. So if we can oscillate the breath, the muscle contractions, the heart rate, all at the same rhythm, we're actually getting better connections. And so this is where my scope of tension instead of position has also shifted a lot in the sense of, or gotten much more in depth. When you look at muscles, right, and we start to pay attention to the amount of afferent and efferent muscle fibers, right, or nerve endings that are into the muscle spindle cells. You have type 1A afferent, type 1B afferent, and then you have alpha and gamma motor neurons, right? So those are efferent muscles. So afferent signals are coming into the body. It's learning to react. That's afferent. Efferent is you saying, I need to control these muscles. And so when you look at where most of the people complain about pain or discomfort in their body, it's muscles you don't really contract at will, right? So low trap, do you contract it at will? Not really. Side delt, not really. You need to move the joint and then it reactively contracts. Upper trap up into the high neck, where people usually have a lot of tension, crossfitters. The mid trap, supraspinatus, the pec minor, you don't really contract those. They're much higher in afferent nerve ending signals. They're much more reactive. Those are giving you signals that the bigger efferent muscles, like the pec major, the glute max, the hamstrings, are not firing. Right? So when you start to look at this, I started to play around with, well, what if there's a hierarchy to muscle contractions?
That's a great question.
Right? So what if they start to go from a static, reactive contraction to a dynamic, reactive contraction to then an efferent contraction? You actually controlling it and wanting it, which you see that happen, but we don't really know how to put a word to it. Have you ever done bicep curls and you don't really feel the biceps, but you get elbow pain? So you're statically, reactively doing the movement, but the muscle's not actually working. You're displacing the tension to the ulnar plexus or to the side delt, depending on how you're creating the tension to complete the exercise.
And this explains why intention is so important for tension.
Exactly. Why understanding what muscles you want to feel is so important, right? And so this gets a little bit deeper because at every muscle, there's the Golgi tendon organ, right? So this Golgi tendon organ kind of goes like this, and this is the muscle, fake muscle, if you guys can see it, right? Wraps around the muscles. And the Golgi tendon organ directly correlates to stress. So what they have found out is that the Golgi tendon organ's job is to protect the muscle at all costs. They tested this by shocking cats, most of their studies. So what they said is essentially, if I have 100 pounds in a bicep curl and I can no longer sustain the 100 pounds, what's going to happen is my tricep is going to contract and it's going to force me to drop the dumbbell. Okay, so that's what science says. Now, I know CrossFitters, you've been a CrossFitter. If you and I are holding 100 pounds at the top of a curl and whoever drops it loses, do you think that your triceps going to contract and make you drop the dumbbell when you can't sustain it with your bicep anymore? Or are you going to displace tension?
I'm compensating into the upper trap and doing anything and everything to make that shit stay up.
Exactly, right? So the Golgi tendon organ allows the body and the muscles to work when it's safe. The nanoreceptors tell it where the tension should go. The cool thing is the nanoreceptors give direct feedback to the Golgi tendon organ to contract or not to contract in order to protect the muscle. A very basic example, you go to do deadlifts. You pop your back, whatever happens. The Golgi's tendon job, and it's getting information from nanoreceptors. That means from eyesight, from hearing, from smell, from whatever it's sensing, whatever's sensing in the hands or the feet. So you walk back into the gym and you see the barbell and you see on your program today deadlifts. And the body immediately signals to the nanoreceptors, to the Golgi tendon organ, we're doing deadlifts again. We almost blew our back. We almost popped our hamstring last time. Let's not do that. Send it to the low back. You're reinforcing the movement pattern because the body does not feel safe doing a barbell deadlift. So you're reinforcing a bad movement pattern. And you do this over and over and over again. And I've been there. I'm sure you've been there, pushing your body. And when there's that one exercise, for me, it was overhead squats or hang squat snatches. And I was like, right? So I would spend 45 minutes smashing my pec minor, smashing with the barbell my traps, trying to get the ball in my rhomboid so I can try and get some mobility, trying to get the band and do the retractions. All I was doing was numbing down the signals to my body saying, bro, you're not safe here. So I even got fireworks for that one.
I like that.
Right? So if I don't feel safe here, but I still mind my way into doing it because that's what the program says, I'm going to eventually create more and more intensity into these smaller muscles. And so what I started to notice, and these were some of the patterns that I started to pick up, is as these muscles create more and more and more intensity to try and make you stop doing what you're doing, which is incorrect movement patterns or incorrect tension through an exercise or a skill, your behavior starts to change. The way that you perceive the world starts to change. So I don't know about you, but when I was going heavy into wanting to be competitive in CrossFit and powerlifting and everything else, I was highly anxious. Yeah. I went from doing one workout a day to doing 6 workouts a day and then adding mobility and then adding recovery, now adding a cardio session, right? That's anxiety. That's hypervigilance. Mm-hmm. So my behavior started to change and I started to pay attention. Most rugby players have the same personality type. Most CrossFitters have the same personality. Most powerlifters, same personality type. And so you start to see this over and over again. So the emotions in the muscles, it's not about crying or it's all connected, but it's more about the way that the body holds on to tension and the way the muscles are able to actively work directly correlate to how the body, the brain, the mind, the soul, the heart, everything perceives its environment externally and internally.
Wow, that's a really great understanding of your mind and how you look at movement. A huge takeaway for me as well that I think is incredibly important is program design, in my opinion, is an estimation for what's going to move the needle in the right direction. If it's not individualized program design, typically it's designed from a constantly varied standpoint to try to move a large demographic of people to enhance the quality of their fitness. And as you just described, let's just use the overhead squat or the hang snatch as an example. You have an experience with that movement, but there's also a biomechanical association there where it's like the way you're built and a lot of the movement patterns that you have in your historical reference being passed, as you referenced, in rugby, in certain sports where you're not necessarily doing an overhead squat, you're slightly hinged forward. For people listening, maybe think of like an athletic position of a basketball player in a defensive stance or maybe an NFL linebacker getting ready to make a play. They're not vertical torso, hands overhead, perfectly upright, weight distributed on, midfoot, slightly back on the heels, knees externally rotated. Any sort of big-time athlete, basketball, football, rugby, soccer, is going to get knocked over if they're in that position.
Right.
So it's not necessarily a primal position. And when you look at the sport of CrossFit, it's like, yeah, there's tons of benefits to overhead squats. There's the midline strength and stability. There's, the mobility components. There's lots of tremendous benefits, but there's also a biomechanical issue. And the point that I'm referencing here, Richard, is that there is an emotional response. When you do that movement, it doesn't feel good. So you're compensating. And then as a byproduct of compensating, you're not winning the workout or you're just getting your butt kicked in the workout. So now there's this perception of like, oh, I'm not good enough. Then it's weighed and measured as to like your personal self-worth. And then potentially over time, maybe you experience an injury. And then after that, you're like, oh, I'm going to scale that movement or I'm going to modify it or customize it, whatever words you want to use that satisfies your internal ethos. But then the environment tells you, oh, you're less than because you changed the workout and you're not in uniformity with everybody else. And I think that's the construct that we can use thoughtful conversations like this to change the narrative, where it's like everybody is on their own personalized journey. we have a generalized blueprint that can then be customized, color-coded, and navigated to appropriately fit the needs of the individual, which synergizes with the emotional response. But I do think there is a level of ego deconstruction and the tribal nature of wanting to fit in that does get weighed and measured into the decision-making of the athlete to whether they want to do the overhead squat or not. I'm not sure if I
Right.
explained that to a sense where you're kind of on the same
Yeah.
frequency, but it is
So
something that's
we
challenging.
can we can add two things to this, right? So you have to remember that in order to build strength, you need neural output of the muscle, the capacity to contract the muscle, right? We need muscle quality, so we can have the mobility to get into that position with muscle quality. We need muscle quantity. We need thickness of the muscle cells to sustain the load. And then we need the skill. A lot of the times we bypass the neural output and the muscle quality in order to gain the skill. And the reason that we do this, right, especially if we're talking functional fitness and these boutique kind of group class gyms, we want to be part of the society. We thrive in being part of the community. If that's what it takes to be part of the community, we will sacrifice, right? We will
Yeah.
self-judge
Yeah.
because that is what we need to do. And it's impressive how I've had clients that I'm like, you need to just slow down. Let's take 3 steps back and rebuild. And, let's take away, just a couple of these high skilled exercises and just build the structure. So meaning build the neural output and the muscle quality a little bit more. And then we can go back. And they're just not willing to do that yet. Right. And again, it's not painful enough at that point or X, Y, and Z, but it's the need to belong where they're at. And so there's a strength in that community, but there also could be a backlash to being in these communities without the right direction from the leader.
Yeah.
And that's a big thing. It's just, I'm never going to tell anybody, no, you can't overhead squat or snatch or bring muscle ups or run an ultra marathon or all of those things. If that's a drive to do it, go do it. But let's understand how to get there the best way possible, because I'm not looking at you running the ultra marathon and that's the big hoorah. I'm looking at, okay, so you run the big marathon and then what's next? Or you go to the CrossFit Games and then what's next? I want you coming out of the CrossFit Games or coming out of that ultra marathon not feeling broken, right? And, maybe not the first one, but the second one, the third one. If we continue down this path, you're going to be to a point where you've developed your identity and you've labeled yourself as X, Y, and Z. And now you can't do it because of the pain, the discomfort, the injuries that have come along with it. So if we can just take a step back and understand that, yes, there are risks involved with high skilled and disciplines, right? Any sport that you're playing, but there are better ways to approach it. Why would we not explore that?
Yeah, that's very well said, man. I'm glad we were able to kind of go down that rabbit hole a little bit, because I think it's something that's going to provide a lot of benefit for people that are trying to integrate within the tribal nature of community, but then simultaneously realizing that in some cases they're doing a little bit more harm than good. And that's kind of where I want to take the conversation next, Richard, which is this thought process of like more is better, but in reality better is better. And this ideation around, oh, I need to give my 90 to 100+% because I want to have the peace of mind that I gave my absolute best effort and I don't want regrets. But then as a byproduct, they're limping out of the gym, like you said, dry needling, massage, all the different recovery techniques, because they're actually hurting themselves. I really want to popularize the ideation of like, it's really cool to leave the gym feeling good. What are your thoughts when some of these things float to the surface a little bit?
Yeah, so it sounds very simple, but I have my guiding principle for training and coaching, right? We have training, which is physical, mental, and emotional. So all training has some of those 3 components, and it needs to be a balanced version for you to be the best possible. Then you have stimulus. The stimulus is much more important than the objective of the training or the skill. What we're looking for is going back to the states, right? So the phylogenetic hierarchy or the polyvagal theory, the flow state, the fight state, the flight state, and the freeze state. We need to make sure that your nervous system is regulated between the parasympathetic and the sympathetic.
Can you say those one more time just to really highlight them for people?
Yeah, so the 4 states would be the flow state. That's where what right now has also been trending since like 2022. The flow state is the ventral vagus nerve. It's the part of you that allows you to socialize, to coordinate. It makes you feel happy and present in the moment. The next one is the sympathetic nervous system. You have your fight or your flight. They're not the same, right? You can't hunt and be hunted at the same time or win and be losing the fight at the same time. You go from one to the other. And when you have the flight state, this is where panic, anxiety, angst kind of tends to build up because there's a lack of expression or some somatic error between the body and different systems in the body and the brain and the expression. Then you have the freeze state, which goes back to the parasympathetic side. And the freeze state is where there's a collapse. So this is the dorsal vagus nerve. This is where you play dead. This is the bear's coming, you just play dead. Or if you've ever been in a street fight or gone in an argument, or if you've ever done Fran, if you're a CrossFitter out there and it's your first time doing Fran and you get to the sets of 15 and you drop the barbell and you're just staring at the barbell blankly. And even though there's a coach yelling at you and there's shit going on, there is nothing you can do in that moment to do anything. You're playing dead. The body's going like, bro, we're shutting down. I don't know what the hell you got yourself into. We're going to play dead and figure something else out.
Totally.
Right?
That's very well said.
Yeah. So the polyvagal theory basically states you're going to go from one state to the other. So you can think of it like a video game. If you win the state, so you make an observation, you make a prediction, you play out that prediction, and you want that experience to be as good or better than that prediction that you made in your brain, in your body, in your system. If you win, you get to jump up the level. So from playing dead, you get to go to now I'm slightly anxious in this sort of sympathetic freeze, panic attack mode, whatever you want to call it. If you get to strategize in your head enough cognitively going like, okay, well, I can come back to cognition, but I still have to do the 15s and the 9s. So maybe I'll just do 3 more thrusters and then break down to 2 pull-ups at a time and then catch a breather. Okay, I'm going to take that action, and you start doing it. You start to win. You take action. You go to fight. Now you're hunting. You're taking action. You're moving forward. If the workout, the experience that you were expecting goes as planned or better, you get to go to flow, and that's where you get your reward. So the body basically works in this system, right? We've taught the body to be in a certain state every time. And that's why when you see people that are always losing at the gym or walking out in pain, because their stimulus is not matching their external environment, right? So if I'm doing something along the lines of Fran, we've all done it. The whole point is to finish dead, right? I always say you're going into Spartan 300. You're a Spartan right now. The Persians are coming. You know you're going to die, but you don't want to go out, whimpering. Like you want to go out there fighting. So there's 2 ways to finish this thing. You finish it, you puke and you die afterwards, or you can puke and have a brain aneurysm in the middle of the workout. Those are the 2 quitting points, right? Like that's what I'm expecting, the amount of intensity, the amount of stimulus that I want you to do during Fran. Now we have somewhere we want to head to, right? Now we're going to do the marathon row. You don't want to go all out effort on that one, right? We have to find the pace. You have to understand that we're in there for the long run. So the stimulus goes between flow and fight a little bit, right? You're changing your strategy, coming back through, staying in the present moment as much as possible, zoning out quite a bit, right? So the stimulus is more important than any sort of actions that you're doing. The stimulus needs to match the action, not the other way around. And so once you get that, then we can actually go to the objective, right? That's what everybody wants. We all want the objective. We want the goal of the deadlift, to lose the weight, to look better, have a 6-pack, play with my kids on the weekend, not have pain in my shoulders. This is the important part. When you're dealing with clients or you're dealing with your community, the first thing that we need before we can get to performance is we need to develop safety and confidence. Then we can have performance. Even when you just have something as basic as I want to lose 10 pounds, 15 pounds, the performance of losing the weight will not be long lasting if we skip safety and performance of the internal and external environment.
I
right?
like that.
So
I
we
like that.
first need to create
That was very
safety.
well categorized for sure. I've never heard it that way.
Yeah,
Safety and confidence before performance.
100%, right? Because I mean, I think CrossFit said it in their level one, right? It was like you build mechanics and then you build intensity and then you build a skill. You build a skill, you build skill mechanics and then something along those lines. But anywho, um, the point being is if you don't feel safe within your body, it speaks to you. That's why we warmed up for 45 minutes before we could touch a bare barbell to try and get the barbell overhead. I don't know if you remember those days. I was there for quite some time,
No, for sure.
right? My body didn't feel safe, and I falsified not even falsified. I numbed down the safety mechanism, right? So anytime that I would feel pain, I would numb down the body going, bro, you don't feel safe, until I couldn't feel it anymore without load. So I was like, oh, let's start moving. And then adrenaline kicks in, and then you can do the loads. And then what happens afterwards? You're limping and you're having to go get all of this stuff done. So building safety in the body is physical, mental, and emotional, right? So I need to build enough safety neural output in the big structural muscles. So then I can build the confidence, which would be muscle quality, the mobility, before I can go towards the performance, which would be the skill. I need to build safety in your body and in the environment around you for you to feel valuable enough so you can feel confident enough to look better naked, right? So we want to lose 10 pounds. I always ask this. I'm like, for what? I think you look great naked. So it's just you feel insecure about how you look in the mirror. That's your perception. I think you look phenomenal. So you don't actually have perspective of how you look, right? Body dysmorphia. Mm-hmm. So if I can create safety within you, which is essentially creating a better connection to oneself, connecting better to the psoas major and the pecs, give you more self-love, build up the lats, give more confidence, right? Now we can actually start to direct you to where, hey, I haven't lost the weight, but I feel much better because I've changed your perception by getting the muscles to contract better, by getting better neural output.
It's so interesting because so many people want to we're such an outcome oriented society. Like at the beginning of every year, everybody's, hey, what are your goals? And it becomes this unique obsession where, hey, we're going to get the goal at all costs. But they're not taking into consideration what you just described, which is the safety mechanism, and understanding that safety and confidence come first. And some of those things have to do with the psychological association. And if you're able to meet people where they're at, create buy-in around the safety and the confidence, you actually almost like clear the brush and you clear the road towards the path of performance.
100%.
But everybody wants
100%.
the performance first. So how do you personally create buy-in around trying to ensure that people feel safe, trying to add, buffers along the way so that people can more rapidly get towards the performance, which is really what they want? What is something you did as a child that you no longer do as an adult? For many, that answer is play. RX Smart Gear allows for your daily workouts to turn into play and exploration. In my training, the Frevo rope gives me access to a versatile rope that I can take with me wherever I go. On the road, at the beach, to the park, or playing at home, RX Smart Gear jump ropes fit my needs. We at Allsmith trust RX Smart Gear. Their gear is always reliable and gives me peace of mind that I will have top-notch equipment to support my health and fitness journey. Hop on over to RX Smart Gear and use the discount code ALLSMITH to shop their latest cutting-edge gear. Have your gear work with you and not against you.
So we go back to the beginning, connection, right? I'm an open
connection
door.
And trust.
Right. And I've gotten some slack and some wordage because I'm not a therapist. I'm not a licensed therapist or a psychologist or any of this. I'm not. Movement is my medium. The changes that happen through movement could be cognitive, could be mental, could be emotional. I'm just like when people go to a bar or people go to their barber and they start to talk. I just have a conversation with my clients. I connect. We speak about things that are happening in life. And from there, I just make them move in certain directions or provide certain guidelines to movement. So think of safety as the way to create a proper strategy, right? So if you can create safety in the environment, in the external environment, is you're providing the client to then understand that it's their actions. Because for you as a coach, right, if you're a coach out there, or if you're going to a coach, the coach is not your captain of your ship. The coach is the navigator. They're there to help guide you through the murky waters. So like you said, clear the brush so you can take hopefully the right path. But at the end of the day, you are the captain of your ship. That's where the confidence comes in. Is I provide the safety. I clear. I go, hey, there's these 3 to 4 different routes that you can take. So whenever I work with a client, I'm like, I see you for at least a year, because I know that it's not going to be a linear. It's not the 5 freeway going up to San Francisco. Like, you're not just going to have this redundant, just kind of straight, boring road. There's going to be ups and downs and curves, and we need to make sure that we understand where we're at. And I'm here to best navigate you. So if I tell you that this is going to happen, it's bullshit. I can help guide you, but I provide the safety by giving you a solution, and not just a short-term solution that you want to hear, but a long-term solution. So the safety and the buy-in comes in with me going, hey, it's going to take about a year, more than likely 2 years, because we have a lot of automatic responses and reactions where the body feels safe. Like, even though we're moving correctly, the body knows it can survive a 300-pound deadlift with the low back. So it's going to try and shift back if intensity goes through, if there's too much stress, you need to go back to autopilot, X, Y, and Z. So, that creating that safety and being truthful with my clients about, hey, there's a solution, but it's going to take time and it's going to take work on your end. Because I can only send you the workouts, right? I can only send you the movements, the breathing, all of this. But it's you putting in that present time of going, hey, I never realized that I hold my breath when I deadlift. Or I never realized that I can't actually exhale. Or I've never realized that my neck is, my shoulder's always here. And now I'm actually starting to pay attention. That's the present moment of them exploring their own body and reconnecting. That's
and you're creating the container of exploration and noticing and paying attention.
Yeah.
And helping people overcome the reactions to the traumas of their past to then have a better path moving forward. And it's interesting because, like, safety and emotions and confidence, they're challenging to measure, right? It's a really difficult thing to measure. And in CrossFit, it's like, oh, what was your time? How much weight? You and I have had that conversation many times. But there is a very important thing to note here, and that is not everything that can be counted counts, and not everything that counts can be counted. And I think it's a subtle paradox. I'm stealing that from the famous Albert Einstein. But there is an overemphasis to our society right now, especially in fitness and business specifically, where everybody they say the numbers don't lie. But there's not necessarily a numerical value associated with connection. There's not a numerical value associated with safety. But you can very much, through observational learning, see when somebody is starting to feel themselves, when somebody's kind of vibing, when somebody's starting to feel safe in their environment, and all of a sudden their expression starts to change. Their performance starts to improve. And I love that you have this great set of lenses to be able to see what's not easily met by the eye.
Yeah, it's a matter of educating your clients, and then being able to, it's not necessarily met by, you can measure it. I always say, like, where's your heart rate? So that tells you kind of where their stress levels are at, right? Which also tells you where their connection is at after an exercise. Breathing is a great way to also measure it. There's a lot of little subtle things there that maybe aren't measurable by most, or, if we're talking about deadlifts and numbers, it's like, well, maybe you're deadlifting the same weight or 5 pounds less, but now you don't have to go see the physiotherapist afterwards to get your back readjusted.
Yeah, there's associated metrics for sure that we can pay attention to.
Yeah, they're slightly non-tangible, right? And the emotional part is, hey man, like, I walked into the gym today and I didn't even feel like I needed to warm up. Like, I felt like I could just walk straight up to a 400-pound barbell and start deadlifting it. Like that's a buildup of confidence right there. That's the system truly understanding that it's physically, mentally, and emotionally not stressed out or overwhelmed by the task that's about to happen. That's
Yeah.
fitness.
Mm-hmm.
That's true fitness, right?
That's the dream, man.
Right.
Warming up sucks.
Yeah, and I always play around with this stuff. It's for me, it's always my game of how well or how auto-regulated and in tune am I. And I'll do this where it's nice, probably not much nicer weather in San Diego, although you guys had some storms, but we had 20-degree weather here. So you're going in from 20-degree weather that's kind of freeze. It's not really snow, it's weird shit weather. I walk into the gym and I go, hey, how much can I deadlift right now? Like straight cold. And I put up a number in my head. And then I go, can I do it or can I not? Right. And there's been times where I'm like, yeah, I'm going to deadlift 500 pounds right now. And I load it up and I'm like, bro, that was the ego talking because you saw that, that big dude that was lifting next to you and you just wanted to show him up being cold, X, Y, and Z. And I'm like, no, I'm not going to touch it. And I'll put the barbell away. And there's sometimes where I put the 500 pounds, I just start repping out 10 to 15 reps. No pain, no discomfort, no elevation of heart rate, no elevation of breath. It felt good.
10 to 15 reps at 500, you're a monster.
It's people are gonna. That's the one thing that people are gonna cling on about the whole podcast. It's the same thing that happened with Mark Bell's podcast. It's not about the weights or the numbers like that. If it's 100 pounds for the person listening, that's the key. Is
totally.
I'm walking up to something that I feel safe and confident to perform. The objective isn't the number of reps. The objective isn't the full range of motion for a competition of a CrossFit Games or a powerlifting meet. The goal is, do I feel safe and confident to perform this task without the risk of injury, without needing to, amp myself up to try and get to the barbell? And so that's always a game that I play. Is like on a cold bar set, what can I do today? And that tells you a lot about where you are for your training for the day. If you feel like, hey, listen, if I go walk in, I'm like, no, I'm going to put, 150 pounds and I'm good with that. It's not a hit to the ego to me, because then I go, okay, so that's where I'm at today. So I'm going to do a little bit more accessory work, get the hamstrings going, get the glutes going, do some lower skill, higher intensity, sled work, things like that will still gear the same movement pattern, still gear intensity, but my body is just not feeling safe for the barbell today. The skill is too much, the whatever it might be, right? And so that's maybe the emotional settings. Maybe I didn't sleep well. Maybe there's a fight going on with my wife or an argument, whatever it may be. Maybe there's stress at work.
Coaching the human first. It's integrating all the various variables and then making an appropriate judgment call. It's not the specificity of the weight or the reps. It's deconstruction of the ego and thinking, what do I need? Allowing that internal voice to be the compass. And you're exactly right, man. People pull semantics or snippets from podcasts and then shift the context. But I'm tracking what you're saying. And you mentioned the famous Mark Bell. I'm a big fan of his. He actually taught a powerlifting seminar with Jesse Burdick back in the day that I attended. And I had a good time with those guys. Thinking of a physiological adaptation, the night before going to that seminar, I was a volunteer firefighter for Los Angeles Fire Department, and I was constructing a fire line on the side of the 405 freeway because there was a pretty rigorous fire. And I was up until 5 in the morning. The seminar, I think, started at like 8:30. And so we were out there. I was covered in soot and dirt and throwing around a Pulaski and using a chainsaw until like 5 a.m. Got back to my house to sleep a little bit at 5:30. And then was up at 8 to make it to the seminar for an 8:30 start. Was very appreciative of the knowledge and education those guys shared. And they helped instill the confidence. At that time, I wasn't the strongest guy in the world. I was fresh, full of piss and vinegar from basketball. And I remember they gave their talk, gave lots of tips and tidbits. Jesse Burdick smacked the hell out of my upper neck. And I remember at that time, I PR'd my deadlift at their seminar at 485. And I was so pumped by it. But in retrospect, I was like, wow, how on earth with 2.5 hours of sleep and just a week of stress was I able to kind of figure that out? And it's exactly what you said. It's the confidence and the safety that they provided within that container that allowed me to then pursue something that was a little bit towards my edge. And
Right.
I don't know, I always love sharing that story. Mark Bell, I don't know if he even knows who I am, but I think it's a cool little retrospect that he's positively impacted my life, and his transition from, over 1,000 squat to, a massive 900 plus deadlift, I believe. And then
Yeah.
into the world of endurance running and the carnivore diet and just the variance and how he's been open to trying new things is very admirable. And most recently, dude, he got his YouTube channel banned. And you and I talked
Yeah.
briefly offline around this concept of censorship. I've listened to his podcast, The Power Project, a few times. What are your thoughts on this whole thing of censorship around health and fitness and people just they're trying to figure out, like, what are some of these biohacking tools? What are the things that are optimally going to help people? And then all of a sudden there's all these regulations that are coming down. What are your thoughts?
Yeah. I mean, there's a big system to fight up ahead. You could see if there's a lack of disclaimers, you could see why YouTube could hold some liability, the channels could hold liability. I think the censorship isn't always, I don't think it's humanly made. I think that there is a lot of algorithms that are at play to try and keep a lot of bad things from the internet to try and help control people a little bit. um, you know, I think you just posted a podcast up of the channel being back and everything, and why it got banned because of some link that took you for anabolic steroids or something. Um, I think that there's some very big companies out there that want to control a large market share of how people behave and the type of environment that people can be in and how complacent people can be. I think that it's changing for the better. Truthfully, I think that, X is doing a great job with free speech. I
Yeah.
think that you're seeing a mass revolution, at least from the circles that I'm hanging with and people that I'm talking with, that I would never. One of the greatest things that I got from, so I did the Mark Bell podcast in December, and, his main target audience is kind of like these meathead strength and conditioning guys, now some endurance guys, but for the most part, kind of like meathead, more on the science academical side, where the proof, where this, that, the other. And I had some great conversations with people that reached out that listened to the podcast wanting to talk about emotions and mental health. And these people were, power lifters, mid 40s, like Southern manly men, on trend and X, Y, and Z. And you're like, hey, man, like, I think the conversation's starting to change. I think that it's going in the right direction, and it's where you choose to put your focus on that can really kind of allow you to go down the spiral road, down the dark path of conspiracy theories that everybody's against you and everything. I think that if you're truly trying to do well for the human population, there might be some censorship, but I think that it'll always be overcome. Uh, it's crazy when you think that that is your livelihood and that's what you're trying to make your livelihood out of. So making sure that you have, they have kind of diversification of a portfolio of where your content can be accessed is important. But yeah, I think the censorship comes more so from a perception that the algorithm's against me and I'm being shadow banned because of these words and X, Y, and Z. I think that if you do a good enough job of sharing your message, the people, like CrossFit did, when it first came out, the people will want to create this revolution and want to share the experiences that they're having, and it'll overcome any sort of ban or shadow ban or anything of that sort.
Yeah. No, I totally agree. I think if you're doing things for the right reasons, eventually it bleeds through. And at the very least, man, I think it's really fun to have some of these controversial discussions and explore. You're famous for the 5 whys. Why is it this way? Why was it created? What's the goal? Where are we going with this? And just really having a childlike curiosity associated with things like the vaccine, things like peptides, things like anabolic steroids, all these biohacking tools that are now being popularized. Some of it might be wrong. Some of it might have direct research. There might be correlational studies. There might be so many different associations with things that people are talking about, but I do think they should be allowed to talk about them. And I think there
Yeah.
can be warnings issued of like, hey, you have to have a disclaimer associated with that. You have to make sure you're providing safe information. And, in some cases, make sure that you make it known, hey, I'm not a doctor. I don't have a PhD. These are things that
Right.
I'm exploring mentally, physically, and emotionally and within my tribe of people to try to gain clarity. And that's how all of us learn. And I think there
Exactly.
needs to be a continuous learning and freedom of speech, which is a huge pillar within this country that is starting to dance a little bit. It's starting to be taken
Right.
away a little bit. However, we never had so many different versions of free speech and influencers having so much pull in the world that, one of these influencers says something or shows that they're having a personal benefit with something, or a company's paying them to use a product, and now all of a sudden it is positively or negatively influencing a large demographic of people. So I understand it from a safety standpoint, but I also think it's important that there is context. I don't know that it's the best option to have AI bots or things that are in control of censorship of a really big page when it has to do with somebody's livelihood and how they deliver information to the world. But I actually really
Yeah.
enjoyed that podcast that you guys had. And it's fun to just keep learning and pushing the boundaries, man. And where I want to take the conversation next, Richard, is just the world of psychedelics. We saw
Yeah.
the Tim Ferriss episode that you talked about, and I'm a big fan of his. He's a trailblazer within the podcast and learning and thought leader space. He's published numerous books, and he's been quite vocal around his challenges with anxiety and depression, and that then manifested into extreme low back pain. And he had a
Yeah.
really awesome conversation talking about how psychedelics eventually led to just, boom, he had a release of this low back pain. And I'm curious your
Right.
thoughts and the associations with Tim Ferriss.
Yeah. So we saw that in the next episode that I'm doing with Dr. Ed. We'll be talking about his DMT experience as well. Um, I have nothing against psychedelics. Everybody has their own route to take. Haven't dealt with psychedelics myself, and people have offered me. Um, but whenever you talk about ayahuasca or combo or any of these sort of routes to go in, if we're talking about the spiritual level, they're supposed to be calling you, right? So like whenever, like I've talked to a few shaman, and they always say the root is supposed to call to you. It's supposed to start appearing, and then it gives you the intrigue to want to go do it. I have personally never had this massive intrigue of wanting to go do a retreat or go do the experience. I have nothing against it. I'm sure maybe one day I will, have an ayahuasca experience or of some sort, or a shroom trip or something. I don't have anything against them. Um, I think that there's great benefit for a small amount of people. I think that the biggest thing to understand with when doing these sort of psychedelic trips is that you are essentially opening up all of these gates at once, and there's no control. And so you get to see a whole lot. So for some extreme cases, absolutely, hey, go at it, right? For some people, it might not be the best thing. And, let's say that we open up all these gates and we see our life events and we get perspective on why we behave the way we behave and everything. What happens afterwards? That's always my question. There's homework to be done, but it's usually on the cognitive side, or it's not passive, but like writing, journaling. Where is the real expression, right? And so I get the expression of the regurgitation, the gallbladder sympathetic expression that forces you to vomit and regurgitate, and all of that for the cleanse. But then there's the path of, you're no longer in this safe environment. The shaman is no longer with you. You have this newfound perception of the world that you're not floating in, that's extremely subjective, no longer objective. How are you going to ground yourself? And when you have to go back to the real world, which at some point, unless you stay out there in the whole spiritual realm, like how do you come back to be in society? understanding that the world does not owe you a single goddamn thing. So if you inside have changed cognitively because you have a new perception, but the body is still holding on to reactive mechanisms that allowed it to survive in the past, you have done just the same thing that you've done to get the barbell overhead by mashing your trap and your supraspinatus and rolling out on the foam roller and passively stretching to feel safe enough to bring the barbell overhead. Except now you're talking about the real world. And if we cannot change physically how we perceive the world, those same reactions will happen. And so if Tim Ferriss does not do something to continuously express and, more importantly, connect to probably his right glute max, maybe his left glute max, the id, right? Create safety within his environment, the hamstring, probably the left hamstring more than the right, with considering that it was about the girlfriend that he was having issues with, right? The same behavioral patterns will come back because nothing has changed physically, and they're feedback loops. So you're essentially saying the fire is not going to burn me again. That's what I feel is happening, not to everybody, but to a lot of people. They're coming into a situation where now the fire is friendly and curious again.
Yeah.
The body remembers. So what happens? You're going to see a fire. You're like, ooh, and then you get burnt again. And what happens? The body's like, bro, we've talked about this. You don't remember? So you recluse further back, right? So
would you say that the use of psychedelics is almost a tool that causes disruption, that changes what you think is safe, and it reinvigorates the thought process that how we got here is not how we get there, and you are then more open and receptive to a new set of either behaviors or circumstances to then inch the needle in the right direction?
Yes. So I think that with the right guidance, right, the right navigator, they're a great tool. I think that there needs to be aftercare.
Yeah.
And, you could see this. There was a documentary and a study done, and you'll have to look it up. I remember I was watching, it was a documentary when Netflix was first came out. And they were doing ayahuasca treatment for heroin addicts. And they all stayed clean for up to about 9 months and then relapsed again. And so what did I tell you earlier in the podcast? I need at least a year, but probably 2. At a cellular quantum level, the reactive mechanisms of the cells will want to go back to what's comfortable. So if there's no active change continuously pushing that needle forward, you're going to fall back. And it's not a good or a bad thing. We go in ups and downs. We regulate.
Human
we have
nature.
Cycles.
Yeah.
So it's more about the aftercare of psychedelics, right? I know there's a lot of great studies going on right now with MDMA and microdosing it under a psychiatrist or psychologist and, working through PTSD. But again, if the body's way of holding on to stress and tension doesn't change, you still just need the right trigger and it's all going to come back.
Yeah. It sounds like a really awesome tool that requires talk therapy, guidance, coaching, teaching, and definitely like a post-care that's going to elicit the optimal change over the course of time. Otherwise, the human body and mind just go back, like you said. And that's why I've seen it and heard about it in ketamine therapy, where the talk therapy post-ketamine treatment is like very, very important. You mentioned something that I really want to unpack a little bit for people, and that is healing is not linear, but it is possible.
Yeah.
Everybody thinks life is linear. We just got to keep getting better. We just got to keep pushing forward. We would love for it to be just like upward trajectory. That'd be perfect, right? This progressive overload. We'd all be, having utopia. Massive numbers. But, it's not linear. It's messy. It's complicated. And the human mind is conditioned to think, what can we get away with until we can't get away with it anymore? And then, pain seems to be the one condition that gets most of us to change. When I say healing is not linear, but it is possible, what comes to mind?
Woo. The universe of Richard. So right now I'm playing around with the thought process of identity. We talk about identity and our authentic self. What is the authentic self? Is it the true self? Is it the id, the ego, the superego? Which identity are we talking to? Which system is progressing and which one is regressing? Right? So you have your cognitive brain, you have the heart, you have the skin, you have the Golgi tendon organs, you have the diaphragm, you have the muscles, you have all of these systems, you have the gut, right? You have all of these systems playing in your ecosystem of the body. So healing is not linear because we can start to make an upward trajectory to feel better, whether that's physical, mental, or emotional. And then at some point, there will be some overload of stress, right? Information coming in. And that overload of stress will either put you, Steve Cotter wrote the book, right? And it's you can only challenge a human by 4% of their current skill set. So whenever that overload of stress happens, you go towards boredom, autopilot, right? You just collapse completely, give up, quit, I'm out. Or you go towards hypervigilance, anxiety, a sympathetic freeze. You freak out and you're trying to analyze and figure out how to get over it, even though you just become overwhelmed and panic, right? So the body knows this very well. And, healing could be, again, from the physical side of I have chronic shoulder pain or hip pain or low back pain to I have PTSD from, being a fireman, police, military, or car accident, or PTSD from getting hit by a rock slide. The body has systems at play that will put you automatically towards that autopilot. The body also gets very comfortable knowing that it can have a level 7 pain or level 5 pain of shoulder discomfort. We've been there, right? I mean, I've been there with CrossFit, right? You're like, yeah, my shoulder's just going to hurt. Like, just deal with it. We have to go to the games. You have to do the next event. You have to do this. You have to do that. So the body understands very well how to survive in that external environment. That's why you have people that stay addicts. That's why you have people that are in abusive relationships, from the real world, or the shitty job, or whatever you want. So the healing needs to come through an abundance of physical stress. That abundance of physical stress is going to force a moment of clarity, right? And as I talked earlier about the oscillation of the breath, the heart, the breathing, it actually creates a bottom-up expression, which forces what's called a quantum leaping moment, a true moment of presence. That moment of presence allows you to gain perspective of your life and make change. That's the same thing as doing an ayahuasca trip, okay? That change is short-lived. Why? Because you're like, well, okay, my shoulder hurts constantly. You showed me how to not feel shoulder pain, but I saw the amount of work it took to not be in shoulder pain, right? You remember the row pulls and the sled presses, and I'd rather just sit on the ball and just roll around for 5 minutes and then go back to moving. It requires action.
I think it's not just action, but it also satisfies the mind to check the box and be like, hey, I did the thing. And you feel better about checking the box, but you didn't actually do the thing. You sort of did the thing.
Right.
And I think putting in the tangible action of the hand-over-hand rope pull, better understanding and deconstructing what you would say, which is the actual root cause, not just the symptom.
Right. Yeah, it's the fact that you want to be active in your change, not passive. And so that's why it's not linear. There's that concept, and then there's the willingness versus the capability. People want change, right? I'm willing to change. I'll do whatever it wants. Sure, cognitively speaking, in this, kind of you wrote it down in your notepad or you thought it up in a dream or whatever it may be, you have the willingness that you're going to change. The body's comfortable being uncomfortable. The body's comfortable being sedentary. The body's comfortable not spending 30 minutes a day breathing and contracting your muscles, right? So the capability is not quite there yet. So the waves that we'll go through with healing, at least when I work with clients on one-on-one, is I look at the behavioral cycles. I look at what their quitting and their sabotage mechanisms are. And we find that, and I don't give them to you because here's a silver platter. Here's me giving you the answers. I allow you to search for them. And that's where the change happens, because I can tell you the answer, but if I make you think about why you should change, then maybe you start to go, maybe he's right. So maybe I don't need to snatch as much, but if I do the overhead yoke carry and the rope pulls, my pecs will get stronger, which will directly correlate to being able to handle more load overhead. I have the skill of the snatch. If I build the structural muscles, well, then maybe I can snatch without shoulder pain. That seems reasonable. So I make you think. You come up with the conclusions. So that's really how you heal. You heal by understanding what are your current capabilities versus how much willingness you have, right? There's people that have a lot of willingness. They're usually more towards the anxiety side. They're willing to sacrifice everything and everything and everything and everything. The one thing they're not capable of is being patient, being with themselves, listening to their breath, being alone with their own thoughts, not speaking for 5 minutes, not having to do the snatch for 3 weeks before they can go back to touching a barbell, right? So the willingness is there, but not really. The capabilities aren't there yet. So that goes based on different systems, right? So looking at the heart, looking at the gut, looking at the diaphragm, the muscles, X, Y, and Z. So I'm always looking at, okay, so what are the true capabilities that you have versus the willingness? Or, hey, you have the capabilities. How come the willingness isn't there, right? That's the addict going, hey, why do I need to stop doing methamphetamines? I'm having a great time. I'm going out partying every weekend. I do 4-day bingers. You see me, I even have a 6-pack. I don't need to eat for 3 days. Life is great. Why do I need to stop doing? Well, you're capable of stop doing meth, but the willingness isn't there yet, right? That's a functional fitness athlete or a power lifter or somebody that's deeply ingrained into what they want to achieve. They're like, well, why do I need to change? This is the way. This is the linear progression that I need to do. And the program says today I need to snatch 100 kilos, so I'm going to snatch 100 kilos. Bro, okay. You're not willing to change then.
Yeah, I think I really appreciate your thought processes on all of that. And it's challenging, man. You're definitely onto something. You're on the right track. And it's very admirable, the pursuits of trying to get people to change, especially in the ideology of, hey, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. But over the course of time, you're anticipating, the collapse based on observation of behaviors and movement patterns. I think your lenses on health, fitness, and all the things are very cool. But where I'm curious, Richard, is now you're doing something around coaching other coaches. And a major trend within the fitness industry is a little bit of this thought process that fitness people are walking the talk. And what I'm starting to see is now fitness professionals are so busy with coaching clients, trying to run businesses, trying to manage social media, trying to do online accounts, trying to do client calls and tons of sales, that a lot of fitness professionals are either faking it for the video or they're actually not practicing fitness anymore. And it makes me sad, like seeing the industry go so much towards fake it to make it, because it's become a monetization as opposed to, no, I actually want to take care of my health. I want to be a guinea pig and personally experience these things because it's part of my continuing education, and then have a better relationship with my clients when they're going through it because I actually practice what I preach. And it's not easy. What I'm saying is not coming from a judgmental place by any means. Like, all of us are really just doing the best that we can. But with so much pressure from social media to continually put out content and make sales and make a living, in the world getting so much more expensive, how do you navigate that? And I'm sure you've had this conversation with other coaches.
Yeah. So I think the first one is I post a lot less videos of me working out, because when I will work out, it's like my time. I think that it's a difficult time to be a fitness professional as much as it is like it's going to get a lot harder. I think true coaches are going to start to stand out going back to the beginning because they give a shit and because they care about human connection. The advancements of AI and how rapidly they're going. I mean, you can go on WhatsApp right now and you can talk to the AI bot for LeBron James and ask for a workout, right? So the people that have just been regurgitating information to try and kind of rotate the 6-week cycle of a client or 3-month cycle of a client, I think will start to go towards some other industry or figure something else out. For me, my my craft, my vocation is becoming a human specialist. I want to truly understand at a macro to micro to quantum level how the human functions, um, so that I can help everybody and anybody, right? And I know that I have a limited amount of space of people that I can truly help because I need to spend time with them. I'm not just a here's the program, follow it, and see you later. I really like to see the progress. It's very difficult for me to, I've been told many times, just write a program and sell it out there. It's very hard for me to do that. I finally did it, and we can talk about that later if you want. But for me, the point of Moved Academy and creating Moved Academy is it's movement education. And it's about being able to understand how to give solutions to the clients that are coming to see us. So a lot of the times, and a big pattern that I've seen in this industry is you do these exercises, 5 exercises to get you out of back pain. And of course, it's great clickbait. You'll get people saving it, sending it, this and that. Again, willingness versus capability. How many ways can you do those exercises? Thousands of different variations, right? From breath to mental state, emotional state, joint position, tension of the muscles, eyes squinting, not squinting, only one eye squinting. I can think of thousands of variations that are running through my head. So for me, it's like I want to develop and revolutionize how the outside community sees fitness and health professionals. I want to bring the trust back into health professionals, right? Back into personal trainers, back into coaches at functional fitness or specialty classes. Like, we have so much power to impact people way more than just a PR in the deadlift, right? And the PR in the deadlift, don't get me wrong, is amazing. And I'm sure the client's eyes light up and everything, but there's so much of a deeper impact that you can have on your clients. I want to have fitness professionals that when somebody comes in and goes, my shoulder hurts, it's not a go see a physiotherapist, especially if they've been your client for 2 years. That means that you've directly impacted negatively towards their health and caused the shoulder issue because you were regurgitating information of how a barbell press should be done or how the program should be followed. You should take responsibility for that as well. So from a very passionate side point, I want to develop and mentor coaches that become just as powerful, if not more powerful than I am. I want to change this industry so that when somebody goes to see a personal trainer or somebody goes to see a coach at a CrossFit box or a boutique gym, there's trust there from the physical, the mental, and the emotional side. It's amazing. It's unreal. I mean, just looking back when I owned my gym and people would come into the CrossFit gym and go, well, I don't squat because I run marathons. And then I went to go see a personal trainer. He made me squat and my knee started to hurt. And there's already a negative connotation. There's already I don't really trust what you're going to give me to do, right? And I have this conversation with coaches all the time where clients are walking in, members are walking in and telling the coaches what they're doing right and wrong. And I'm like, well, are they or are they not? And they don't have an answer. And I'm like, well, you should have the answer. It's what you do for a living. It's not a part-time job. And so that was the creation of Movement Academy. Is I want to revolutionize the fitness space, how CrossFit revolutionized the fitness space. I want to bring trust to the fitness professionals and give them value for the amount of time and devotion that they put in to learning. Now, obviously, there's a lot of masses out there that will, regurgitate the information they learned from NASM or from ACE or from CrossFit seminars. And then there's those coaches that truly care. Those are the ones that I want to help because those are the ones that will stick around when AI is giving out everybody's program, which is happening right now. You have a lot of big influencers that just put programs on ChatGPT and then they sell it to the masses. And it doesn't work.
You make a really valid point
solutions
there. And I think the trust factor is huge and it can't really be faked. It takes time to build it. And we talked briefly around the 5 whys. And if you know the why, you can typically endure any how. Whether the client has pain, whether they have emotional pain, whether they have goals for high-level performance, body composition, weight loss, whatever it is, it starts with the trust. And just to
Right.
give some clarity to our listeners, man, what's the name of your program and where can people find it?
Yeah, so it's movedacademy.com. So it's a coaching group mentoring program. It takes about 6 months to go through the basics. It's basically content fed because I had all the content up and people were going through it and they're like, okay, I know everything by. And I was like, that's not the point. I'm like, you could watch this video, go apply it for 3 weeks, learn something, and then move on to the next one. Like, the goal is to evolve. So it takes about 6 months. We do group calls. I have like 280. It's going to be close to 300 hours of content by
Nice.
the end of next month. Yeah, and it's been great. We have a great community of coaches. My goal is to have this sort of decentralized network of moved coaches that I can help everybody, but I'm not effective at helping some people. What I mean by that is we all have different personality traits. I am, me, I'm definitely not a very structured person. I have structured coaches that have helped me put together Moved Academy, and I'm extremely thankful for them. And I have my wife that's extremely structured, thank God, because otherwise I would not be on this podcast right now. But so it's the whole goal here is that if I have a client that needs help and is in San Diego, I can have coaches that I can trust that are in San Diego. If I have a client that comes in that the personality type is going to drain my energy, then I go, hey, here's this coach. She's very type A, going to put everything as you like to see it. Go see them. So the goal is to create a network of coaches that will revolutionize how the fitness industry is seen, and more importantly, how the fitness industry communicates. Because I don't know if you've experienced this, but we are dealing with a bunch of used car salesmen.
Yeah.
From gym to gym and coach to coach and PT to PT, trying to undersell and do this and do that. We should be helping each other. There are so many people in this world that need help, so many. But because we're constantly trying to fight and clickbait and all of this, we're really just fighting amongst each other and completely forgetting about the service and the people that we want to help.
Great
so
point.
The goal is to have this network of coaches that, hey, we should all be fucking building everything up. Let's just get on the right page, right? Let's understand how the body's working. And, if there's something new that comes up and I was wrong on something, hey, let's discuss it and let's change it. Like, that's the goal. We are here to evolve. Our craft is not about proving each other wrong or putting each other down. It's about building each other up and continuously learning how the body's moving. Like, it's not about who's right and who's wrong. It's about, let's get the clients to their goals and let's get them out of pain. Let's get them to perform, so on and so forth.
The Trident family taught me something really important this last year, that we are all a bundle of stories, both good, bad, and everything in between. All of their cold brews remind their customers that they are part of something bigger than themselves. I start my day with the Sweet Cream Cold Brew as I am prepping my mind and body for fitness, service, coaching, and podcasting. With various locations in San Diego, they offer over 14 nitro cold brews and a variety of specialty drinks. You can find the perfect brew and pair it with one of their treats from the Keto Bakery. You can check them out over at tridentcoffee.com and use code ALLSMITH to take your coffee experience to the next level. Yeah, that's beautiful, man. What are some of the seminars that you're putting on, and what's this thing all about, movement ayahuasca, that you share quite a bit about on your Instagram?
So I have, there'll be seminars coming up that are fundamentals of a moved coach. So basically all the basic principles and how to apply them to group classes and one-on-one PT clients. There is the assessment seminar. So it teaches you how to go in depth into a one-on-one assessment, or if you have group classes, how to start to assess clients in a group class and regress or progress clients as needed based on mobility needs for pressing overhead X, Y, and Z. Emotions in our muscles would be the third one. It starts to go in depth on how the body is storing these reactive mechanisms, this information of events that are happening in life. So we'll go in depth into the muscles contractions, the Golgi tendon organ. We go a little bit more in depth into Swami and that whole method that I've created.
What is Swami?
So Swami is an old Hindi word that means connection to oneself. From the Mark Bell podcast, I should stop trying to bring any sort of religious talk into what it is. It is a method for you to connect to your truest self. So as I talked earlier in the podcast about the oscillation of the breath, the heart rate, and the muscle contractions, essentially what this does is it forces an active approach to meditation and breath work. We're breathing and contracting the muscles actively. So you can't just sit there and breathe. We're forcing on contracting bigger structural muscles and making connection to those muscles. And so from the physical standpoint, if I take somebody through a Swami session, I could see where they displace tension when the load or the stress or the mobility goes too far. So meaning that if I can see in Swami, you're squeezing the pecs and I see the shoulder elevate, it's the same shoulder that's going to elevate when you go to do a barbell press or a bench press or a push-up. And so it allows me to see physically how I can assess somebody to get them out of pain and discomfort. On the mental side, I'm able to see if they're more on the anxious side or more on the depressive side. And then on the emotional side, I can see where they're storing emotions or storing events and trauma. So I can essentially kind of start to see what has happened in the person's past. We can bring those things to light. We can express them, so we can have that bottom-up expression that is usually what you see with breathwork practitioners, where people are crying and such. We're allowing a release of information and a change of perception. It allows you to upregulate or downregulate the nervous system. And I'm getting closer to seeing how we can do an active release of a micro DMT. So a micro ayahuasca, if you will. And so that's what movement ayahuasca is. So movement ayahuasca, there is no psychedelics involved. It's just your body, breath, and movement. So I've done this now. This one coming up in Croatia is going to be my sixth one. I think so. Phenomenal results with people. It all started because I was doing one-on-one assessments, and I was expecting to, and this is when I was experimenting with playing with the nervous system and active contractions and breath while moving and contracting and high stress, physical stress. And I was able to see these emotional expressions and see the patterns that we've talked about earlier. So movement ayahuasca is a 4-day retreat that essentially becomes very intimate. And I allow you to break down the ego, allow the expression of the id, and then the connection and acceptance of the true self. And so we do this all through movement. We essentially do it as a group. Everybody has their own set of guidelines, constraints, movements. And we go day by day, and we just kind of have these conversations throughout the whole retreat, just kind of learning and experimenting about ourselves, and just really, again, gaining perspective of how we choose to react when stress gets overwhelming, right? Stress.
Very cool, man. It sounds really cool. I'm going to need to carve out some time to come spend some time with you. Do you bring in equipment for this stuff? Is there a journaling practice? What does the introspective components look like, and what does the movement look like, case dependent on each individual? Yeah,
so there'll be an intake where we kind of go through your history, discomfort in the body, tension points, what you want to work on, what your expectations are. From there, I develop a plan. I have a journal that I've made up with different guidelines and things that you can kind of read and information. And then I put in the different workouts that you'll be doing throughout the days in there. The day starts with morning active meditation. So walking, listening to a very specific playlist that I've made, and thinking on very specific guidelines. So I give you certain topics to think about on that walk. Then you come back, we have a quick breakfast, we go through a Swami session, we do what I call the gauntlet, which is a series of exercises. Usually takes about 4 to 5.5, 6 hours, depending on the person. It's a whole lot of movement. It allows you to cycle through that phylogenetic hierarchy that we talked about quite a bit. So it creates a lot of clarity, and usually that crashes people. And then we'll have a discussion afterwards. We'll have a nice dinner. Again, not making it so spiritual and a thing to survive. It's about enjoyment as well. So you've done something hard. We've brought down the ego. Let's have a nice glass of wine. Let's have some steak. You don't need to drink wine. I'm going to have a little bit of wine, right? But let's also bring in the socializative aspect that I think we've lost a lot of, which is let's just sit down at the table or cook a piece of meat and open fire and have a conversation. The next day is expressing the id. So again, we'll have active meditation. We'll do a little bit of Swami. We'll do a very specific expression session that I've developed that allows a maximal expression of the id. And then from there, we go back to a Swami session. We'll have another day to just kind of allow everything to process. They have their journals they can write things down on. I hang out with them 24/7. So they want to come talk to me. If they want to go hang out by themselves, if we want to go play some games, X, Y, and Z. And the third day is just creating acceptance. So we've been able to let go of the superego and what we care about because we have such a safe environment. We've broken down the ego, the justifications that we've always made for ourselves. We've expressed how we've truly felt in these past events. And now we get to accept our truest self and we can rebuild from there. And then once we finish that, then I give usually about a week or 2 weeks for you to go back to your regular environment, the real world. And then with some guidelines of, hey, you need to be doing this as a morning routine, takes about 20 minutes, very specific muscle contractions or connections to muscles. Try doing, X, Y, and Z. And then about a week later, we get back on a call and we discuss about how is the real world treating you, what's going on, how are you, reacting and behaving, and then, what are the action points from there. So the whole point is, we're doing an entire transformative retreat, but then we have a blueprint going forward. And the beauty of it is that it's all done through movement. So you can do it when you're home. It's very minimal equipment. This last one that I did, we had a few sandbags and some dumbbells and some kettlebells. It doesn't require a whole lot of equipment. It's just very bare bones.
That's great, man. I appreciate you describing that for us so we can better understand what these retreats look like, what comes with it. And hopefully some of our listeners will be able to participate and really move their life towards, what they want, that end goal of what they want their life to look and feel like. As we wrap things up today, Richard, I have what I like to describe as like some final questions. I'd love for you to answer them in either one word or one sentence. And try not to think too deeply on these. Try your best to just kind of give your knee-jerk response, whatever floats to the surface.
Beautiful.
Awesome. The first one that I love to ask, I stole this one from Jay Shetty. What's the best advice that you've ever received?
Keep it simple.
Yeah, that's a beautiful one. KISS, right? Keep it simple, stupid.
Yeah.
What's the worst advice that you've ever received?
You can't do this.
I could even see your body language get a little bit irked by the word can't. What's one thing that you've learned so far in being a business owner and integrating your own version of how you want to deconstruct the mental, physical, and emotional stimuluses that you see?
Can you repeat that one more time for me?
Yeah, what's one thing that you've learned in this personal pursuit of trying to share and elevate and educate different people in the world through movement?
Don't stroke your ego and build a fucking good support system.
I love that. I say it often, and I steal it from a good friend of mine. Success is in the agency of others. And I say it often, and for whatever reason, that one keeps coming back to us. What's the biggest lesson you've learned in the last 12 months?
Biggest lesson I've learned in the last 12 months. Make sure that the details are ironed out before moving forward.
Ironing out the wrinkles, man. That makes for a nice, pristine shirt.
Exactly.
That's dope, man. As we self-reflect today, is there anything that you anticipated me asking you that I didn't ask that you would love to share to our audience?
No, I think I always come into these things without any expectations. So I think you kind of hit it all.
Nice, man.
Yeah, it was a great conversation.
Yeah, I enjoyed learning from you today. And my final one that I'd love to pick your brain on is there anything in your heart that you would like to say or share that you think is very valuable as far as your impact on the world?
It's very simple and minuscule, the amount of effort that you need to put daily to make massive impact in how you perceive the world. So if you're feeling down, anxious, sad, all of that, I get emotional thinking about it, right? Don't need to do much. Wake up in the morning, do calf raises. Just do 1 set, 2 sets, get the calves moving, do some push-ups, drink some water, keep it simple. But
Yeah, man.
that can make such a big impact.
Yeah. Those little things really add up to be big things over time. And that almost gave me goosebumps, feeling you get emotional and how you really want to impact the world and just the depth of care. A couple of major takeaways that I want to share from our conversation today is just the importance of giving a shit, right?
Yeah.
It really does matter. Nobody cares how much you know till they know how much you care. And that level of connection really allows you to build that trust, that buy-in, to then share the X's and O's of fitness, physiology, and all the cool things that so many health professionals gather from the wide variety of seminars out there. And ladies and gentlemen, Richard Aceves, where can people find you, Richard?
Instagram at Rare Barracuda, and then at Moved Academy, richardaceves.com. And yeah, if anybody needs help or anything, send me a message. I try to respond. I respond to everybody that sends me a message. So message me on Instagram or send me an email, info@richardaceves.com, and I'll respond as quickly as I possibly can.
I appreciate it, man. I look forward to crossing paths with you soon. Appreciate you carving out the time to have a special conversation today. For those of you listening, just remember, greatness is forged, not found. Thanks for listening to this episode of the All Smith Project.